וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, נשאו ראש בני גרשון גם הם לבייס אבוסם למשפחוסם.
Our weekly Torah portion is called Nasso, and it's taken from the book of Numbers, chapter 4, verse 25, when the Lord speaks to Moses and says, take the census of the sons of Gershon, also by their father. This chapter continues the distribution of the Levitical assignments among the different clans of the tribe of Levi. And it ends the enumeration in chapter 5, where actually everything is put in action and the camp starts moving. And when a camp is formed, God asks to enact now the ordinances with regards to uncleanness and leprosy. Now the camp is ready to go. And when the camp is ready to go, the narrative suddenly changes its flow. And the two legislations are introduced. One legislation in Numbers chapter 6 is regard to the Nazir, or the Nazirut, which is very important legislation because it contrasts the situation with the Levites, where every Levite is assigned to the service of God. Well, what about the rest of the people? What about somebody who wants to serve God? God says, no problem. You have to be a Nazir. You have to take upon yourself the vow of Nazirut. A certain limitation, you shouldn't touch the grapes, and the grapes, of course, is an equivalent of some ice cream and cake in this particular situation. So there is an element of ascetics introduced, but it is important for God to have people not only from the tribe of Levi serve Him. These people, the difference between the tribe of Levi and the Nazirim is that the Nazirim actually serve for nothing. They do not receive the tithe. They're not receiving any kind of offerings, from the sacrifices. In fact, they are not participating in any ritual activity, and they don't touch the sanctuary because this is assigned to the Levi, a specific ritual functions. But they are still very important because they are the part of the spiritual strength, and they provide for spiritual welfare of the entire nation of Israel. And this is why it's so important. Later on, in the reign of David, we realize that there are about 24 orders of the priests. This means that the priests perform the ritual function in the sanctuary only 2 weeks a year. And the rest of the time, they are assigned, as we read according to Leviticus 10, they are assigned to teach the people the law of God. And that's why the Nazirim are, in this sense, doing exactly the same. And in fact, that they are not allowed to touch the dead in the same fashion as the priests are not allowed to touch the dead shows the commonality between the assignments and the duties of Nazirim during the time of their vow and the duties of the priests. And one of the famous Nazir, which is known in the Bible and is the Samson, about whom we have the Haftarah, which is found in the book of Judges chapter 13. And it shows that the Samson has become the important man in Israel and has become the man, the judge, the supreme judge of Israel. And he was effective only when he was under the vow of Nazirut. And when he betrayed his vow, he had to die. And this is all the strength, as we learn in the story of Samson. All his miracles he performed was because he was under this Nazirut vow, which definitely explains and it shows, illustrates that certain people under this vow, they may have a special certain relations with God, and God can manifest power through them. And that was their roles. In fact, we see there are different people among Israel during the course of Israel history who became the prophets, and they created miracles. But these people were not from the tribe of Levi. The Levites were assigned their portion, and the Nazirim, the other servants of the Lord, they come from other tribes of Israel. And it shows that the issue of service to the Lord, first of all, is not limited to being born in the tribe of Levi, and second of all, it is not particularly second of all, it is accessible to all the people. And based on this, in the 1st century BCE, we observe the start of and the development of the Pharisaic movement, which was certainly an alternative to the temple. When the temple elite became corrupt, the Pharisees, in fact, they started supporting the ministry of God. And it was them who became scribes and who were responsible for reading the scriptures and spreading the knowledge about the law of God among Israel. They were sort of lay ministers. They did not live on a tithe, but eventually the rabbinic Judaism has originated from this notion of the people from not a Levitical background, but who want to dedicate themselves on a service to the Lord. The other important legislation is found in the book of Numbers, chapter 5. And that legislation, it's the first time we see a casuistic legislation. The style here is very particular. If in the book of Leviticus and Exodus, most of the laws, especially in the book of Covenant, which is the Parashat Mishpatim, the judgments, most of the laws are written in apodictic form, just saying, for example, do not carry the empty rumors, judge fairly, and so forth. These laws now, and in the further Torah portions, will be mostly casuistic. Casuistic involves the if and then formulation, where if just describes the situation. And here's the situation. Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, if any man's wife goes astray and is unfaithful to him, and a man has intercourse with her, and it is hidden from the eyes of her husband, then she is undetected, although she has defiled herself, and there is no witness against her, and she has not been caught in the act. If the spirit of jealousy comes over him, and he is jealous of his wife, when she is defiled herself, or if the spirit of jealousy comes over him, and he is jealous of his wife, when she has not defiled herself. This is the if part. In this situation, we see the description of the family problem. When the husband is suspecting his wife but there is no witness. The witness part here is very, very important, because later in the Torah portion, in Deuteronomy 22, we will find the law that if two man and woman are caught in the act by the witnesses, they are to be executed. In this case, she is not caught in the act. And so the solution here, that the woman is put through a specific ordeal where she has to drink the bitter water. And of course, such a legislation causes the horror in today's reader, especially at the time where the issues of equality is raised. And of course, the Judaism here makes a very specific conclusion and assumption. In the Jewish legislation, adultery is the crime which belongs only to a woman. Definitely, this is not biblical. According to the Decalogue, the Revelation, the seventh commandment says, al lo tin-off. It is in masculine, the verb tin-off. It doesn't say lo tin-efi, which is actually addressing the man's behavior, not the woman's behavior. The second problem with this situation is that it's much more rare, especially in the Eastern context, to find a wife that would cheat on her husband. What is going on here? This law does not look like it sounds. Even though it sounds very, very harsh to the women, very discriminatory according to the Western standards, this is actually not a discrimination, but a protection for the woman. The Jewish law is very clear. If the man decides to divorce his wife, he has to pay out the settlement outlined in the Ketubah. This legislation is very old, because we can see today, and even the old Babylonian marriage contracts, which indicate a severe penalties which the father of the bride puts upon the future husband, should this future husband make a decision to divorce. Adultery is an exception clause. In some Babylonian contracts, adultery is even punishable by death right away. Here we see a situation where the law of the Torah is closing a serious loophole on which the husband can use in order to justify the divorce without paying out the penalty. The law says that it is not allowed, that the husband is not allowed to actually divorce the wife without an investigation. This is why we need a then part. The situation is described, but the then part describes the action. And the action starts with verse 15, where it says, "Then the man shall bring his wife to the priest, and shall bring as offering for her 1/10 of ephah of barley meal. He shall not pour oil on it or put frankincense, for it is a grain offering of jealousy." The interesting part here that the spiritual aspect is involved. If there is a problem, if there is a jealousy issue, if there is a suspicion on a lack of trust, or maybe an evil intention of the husband, the way out is one. You go to the sanctuary. You stand in front of the Lord. You bring the offering. Let the sanctuary, let the priest be involved, not the court be involved. And then after this offering, the woman is given a test. It's a water which has a mix into it from the dust from the floor of the sanctuary. And the priest says, if you're not guilty, this water is not going to do any harm to you. But if you indeed are guilty, then all the curses of this water will come upon you. This is very different from the ancient Babylonian laws of Hammurabi, where the test of the woman who is suspected is she is thrown into the water, and only if she survives, she is not guilty. In other words, we have here the presumption of guiltlessness. The woman is not guilty unless the curses work. And in this case, the husband is put on a spot. Because if the curses aren't working, the husband's accusations are baseless, and the husband is ashamed. Unfortunately, in the Pharisaic interpretation, this law is changed. Particularly, the basis for the change of this law is the word kinui, which here in the context definitely means the cereal offering. Although the word itself is a hapax legomen, it occurs only once in the scripture, and that's why its meaning is hard to determine. Based on this, in the Mishnah, in the tractate Sota, kinui is not an offering which is brought into the sanctuary. Kinui becomes a warning, a public warning that husband gives to his wife in front of the witnesses, the warning of jealousy. If a husband says to his wife, look, I am publicly warning you against this and this man, this will automatically mean that the woman is watched. And in the tractate Sota, it clearly says they watch her. And they, of course, are the Talmidei Chachamim, or the young Pharisees. And then it says, if the woman is found with the man, with that particular man against whom the warning is written, in secluded place, and spends in secluded place, as Rashi comments, a time sufficient to boil the egg, then she is taken away from her husband and brought into the Sanhedrin. This is the issue here. The law is completely reinterpreted. And according to the law of Numbers chapter 5, she is taken into the temple. She goes with her husband. But in this situation, the husband is absent. She is separated from her husband. And that is the difference. And she is brought by the Pharisees all alone to the priest, who gives her a warning and then asks her publicly, on a public place in front of the people, are you defiled? And that's again the deviation from the biblical principle. No public is present described here in the book of Numbers chapter 5. But here, the question is asked, are you defiled? And the woman has two choices. And it happens before she even starts drinking the bitter water. She has two choices. If she says, yes, I'm defiled, this automatically means that she walks away with nothing, and even she can't even take her children. But if she insists on her innocence, Then the priest keeps adjuring her by holding her by her shoulder and shaking her until the clothes on her is rent. And only then she is drinking a bitter water. In other words, the woman is really humiliated, and she has only two choices: either to take the guilt and lose everything, or to be publicly humiliated first before she even tested with a bitter water test. And that's exactly what is happening here in the book of John, chapter 8. The story is often misunderstood or misread. That's the story about the woman who is caught in adultery. As it says in verse 3, the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act." It is interesting how most of English translations put this in the very act. But there is no very act in the Greek original. In fact, this makes absolutely no sense. In the very act with whom? There is no man involved here in this story. And of course, if there is no man, the death penalty cannot be applied. It means she wasn't caught in a very act. It means there are only indirect evidences. And indirect evidences cannot be a basis for the death penalty or even for the capital case. What is the situation? Of course, one of the traditional interpretations here that this woman is Mary Magdalene, who was the prostitute. And the entire Catholic tradition has all kinds of mystics on this matter. Plus, on the other hand, there are a number of even the producers who produced the movies about Jesus' relations with Mary Magdalene. There is no word here, any single mentioning of the name Mary Magdalene. In fact, this woman was married because she was caught in adultery. There are two words in Greek which indicate two different sexual offenses. Adultery, which is moicheo, which is used here, means a marital offense, while porneo, or fornication, means illicit sexual activities for unmarried people. Here we have definitely a married woman dragged all the way to the temple, exactly as it is described in the tractate Sotah of Mishnah. And this is why Jesus is not buying into their idea of stoning her, because he knows why this woman is in a temple. Not to be stoned, but to become a public strip show. This is why Jesus starts writing on a sand, and the people leave this woman alone. Did this woman commit any offense? Yeah, according to what it says here, no one condemns you, and Jesus says, go and sin no more. But the punishment really doesn't fit the crime here. God is not interested in making a public humiliation from the sinner. God is not interested in dragging the sinner through the public and making the sinner a public spectacle. God is not interested in people who would be looking for such a public spectacle and pointing the fingers. This is why the story here illustrates and indicates that there were some tensions when the Torah was reinterpreted by the rabbis, or particularly in this case, pre-rabbinic time, by the Pharisees in the wrong way. And the story really shows the harmony between the law of the Torah and the principles of the gospel.